Hi guys, welcome to episode 3 of Forests and Freedom. We have a special guest with us today, which we'll introduce very shortly, but a couple of quick things. On the challenge I made with Topher, he will not be going ahead with his hair, so Warren doesn't get the interview with my crazy wig on looking like a greenie.
Good.
Which is a bit sad, but that's probably good for me because I don't really need the image. This week's going to be a little bit different with episodes. So we got this one dropping today on Monday, as is normal. On Thursday, the 17th of April, we're going to drop another episode, which is going to be our interview with Jordan Ditloff from the Libertarians. And then on April the 22nd, which is the Tuesday of next week, we're going to have a special episode, a live stream. And that's going to be all voter education. That whole day, the page is voter education so that you guys are informed. You don't have to follow Carly's how to vote cards, but you know how to make a difference in the Senate for whatever your personal preferences are. And that live stream will be at 8 p.m. on the Tuesday the 22nd.
And Carly's going to be hopped up on coffee trying to stay awake until 8 o'clock at night. I'm a grandma.
Yeah, people don't realise Carly goes to bed at like 5:30 p.m. or something like that.
7. So, it's 7:30, 8.
All right, but we'll get into it because we're not here to hear from my insufferable voice. You get a bit of a break today. We've got one extra person with us, so you won't have to hear as much from me. We have Warren Pickering, is it? Yeah.
How do you not know Warren's name by now?
It's just
I was going to say it's fairly European spelling, mate.
I hear different pronunciations, and I'm not really good at reading because of the dyslexia, so I thought I'd just double check.
Justified.
Yeah, and Warren's from One Nation and running for the Senate in Victoria, and we want to get to know Warren a bit.
Hey, team. Thank you for having me on. Appreciate what you guys are doing. And as a recreational bush user myself, born and bred out in the Gippsland region, I very much am on board with what you guys are doing, and I will do everything within my power, whether I'm in the Senate or not, to continue to help develop this movement.
And I will say too, just from the beginning, Warren actually popped up in our group out of nowhere, and I was like, "Who is this Warren Pickering guy?" Like, I have no idea who this is. And he just kept commenting and getting in on the group and everything in the early days when I first started the group, Victorians Against the Great Forest National Park. And he's just been instrumental the whole way through. Like, he's turned up to rallies. Warren has been just amazing for our cause from the beginning, even before anyone knew anything about it, before there was any numbers behind it, like, just down to earth, good bloke.
No, thanks for
put that out there.
Appreciate you saying so, mate. But so for me personally, like I have grown up trail bike riding out in the state forest out here, out New G, and I still ride out at Beards with my mates now, and full driving and whatnot, bow hunting and stuff. So fully on board. And I think I joined just with my personal profile before the political one, because it's hard being a representative for One Nation. Certain people won't let you in. They think you're just there for the political component of it, which of course you are. That's the point of getting into politics, to be able to advocate for your communities. But yeah, I'm pretty sure I just jumped on with my personal originally because I feel so passionately about it too. And yeah, it's such an important issue for all of us out here. It's our mental health, it's our lifestyle, it's what we do, it's what we live for.
It is. Well, we really appreciate everything you've done for the cause, so thank you from the beginning.
I think it started as a rant when the eminent panel were out doing their their tick in the box community consultations.
The post-it notes.
Yeah, they did one the post-it notes. It just gave me the shits. I don't know if I can swear, guys. It drove me bonkers. I turned up and they were having us all out here at Druin. Everybody grab a post-it note and write on what you like to do in the bush and stick it somewhere on the map. It felt like grade prep. I'm like, this really? Does this stacks up as community consultation in 2024, does it? I was just disgusted. So I did a post about that. And Sky News got a hold. I think you might have shared it on the page, but then Sky News got a hold of it, and I was on with Andrew Bolt. So just discussing a few things, and then that obviously expanded into the native timber industry and whatnot as well, and the decimation of that. the other breadwinning industry we have in the region. So yeah.
Yeah, it's actually it's really funny. Those consultations, I went to the one in Alex, and that's what made me start this whole thing. If they had have just done those consultations right, this national park would have been already like legislated. Like
That's
last
it.
year, last
Even if
July.
they just listened to us and completely paid us off, we would have gone, oh, well, they listened to us. Looks like,
Exactly.
more people want it to. We probably wouldn't have known. But
they
the fact
screwed
that
it
we
up
then
that
went,
badly.
no, this seems like garbage. I've got to look into this. And you with your detective work, uncovering the fact that, that the groundwork that they'd put in when asking people what they'd like to utilise their bushland for was conducted in Paran and South Yarra.
Yeah.
Woefully inadequate.
They've got no one to blame but themselves.
100%. Yeah. That actually, so just touching on the timber, that we just dropped a policy last week, new federal policy to campaign off. So it looks like we're the only party that's still actually supporting our very much renewable and well-regulated native timber harvesting industry. So, obviously staying out of old growth forest, but a lot of these, our stewardship of timber in this country, especially in Victoria, Tassie, and southeastern South Australia, is incredible. It's amongst the best in the world. And the trouble is, again, with that industry, we're now just transporting that problem geographically to other countries that have less stringent standards and terrible practices. Also, we can sit on our moral high horse and spit vitriol about how we don't harvest our native timber industry. It's just a farce.
The thing that gets me is the fact that, they don't have like low environmental standards in other countries. They have no standards. So they will just go in and they will just literally just kill the animals that are in there, when we could be doing it a lot more sustainably. And like, I don't have a position really on it. I feel for the people that lost their jobs and everything. But that's
my trouble is, look, we care about nature, absolutely we do. Of course we do. Those of us that are bush users care more about it than anybody. We care about fuel loading. We care about the things that are going on as a result of not having people operating in those industries out in our bushland. But the trouble is, you look at timber industry itself as we don't even produce paper in this country anymore. So we're buying it from elsewhere. All right, where are we getting it from? We're getting it from illegally, bulldozed, potentially, ancient rainforests in Papua New Guinea, where there is zero practice, zero standards and whatnot. So, while we'd love to never have to chop down a tree again, the reality is most of them were planted for this purpose. Most of the ones that are harvested are thinned and planted for this purpose. So whether you're against the industry or not, the reality is it's irresponsible of us not to allow our own stewardship and control our own standards of practice, and still have the same amount of demand for timber that we bring in from other countries. Like it's not as if we're utilising any less timber as a result of not having a native timber industry. It's just madness. And look, we also expose ourselves to other hazards through, pests and whatnot, introduction of biohazards and all sorts of things, bushfires, everything. Yeah. Anyway.
I think that's something on the timber industry that a lot of people miss, is that is a part of our firefighting force. We've just taken that away at a time when parks are kind of getting defunded. We need them more. So, but that's another conversation outside of people's jobs and just the sustainability of how we do it.
Well, now instead of having all that machinery in the bush there, when fires have started up, they don't have it in there. So we're spending so much more money on aerial, people coming in planes and dropping water and water bombing and everything. Like even in Ilden, we've had that many water bombers, and then you see the forest fire managements with like all the bulldozers and everything coming from Alex and from 30, 40, 50 kilometers away, and going up into the bush with that machinery. And by then it's too late.
Yeah, look, and you highlight a key point there. The reality is we know, the Victorian state government already can't keep up with things. They've laid off 3,000 Decker staff, and a lot of those are from forestries. All the while we've got this cumbersome and oversized, expensive government through, the public service, but they seem to be laying off the people that we do still need. And what could have at this very time, what could have fulfilled that need was that private sector through the free market economy and these timber giants out here that have been operating these forests for years and managing these forests for years had all their machinery out there. Now they don't. I just say, like, it was effectively work that was done for free to maintain tracks and all sorts. So it's pretty frustrating to see. It really is from all ends.
Yeah, very short-sighted. I suppose I better hit you up with a question, eh?
Please.
I'm hearing a lot, because people are obviously pretty fed up with Labor, so I'm hearing a lot of people saying, look, we can't do minor parties this election. We need to vote for the Liberal because we can't risk Labor getting in. And they're saying this about the Senate and lower house. So, you know, we are going to do, obviously, a whole day and a whole episode on voter education, but do you want to address that real quick, why it's not actually such a problem?
Look, I'm really happy to address that because we do suffer a huge amount of political illiteracy in this country. And I personally don't believe that's an accident. We moved political science from the syllabus in Australia in the 80s, and now people of our own generation, yours and mine, don't have a clue on how best to affect a vote in this democratic system that we have. Now, our system is a good one. When everybody says, no, it's buggered, it's not. It's actually really good. And the preferential system is good because it gives us the opportunity to have a varied group of voices from different parties that aren't expected to toe a party line specifically, or that might share views that are outside of the mainstream, which is, what we perceive the major parties to be. Now, yeah, nobody wants a Labor government. Don't get me wrong. Nobody right now wants a Labor government. They're, state and federally, especially here in Victoria. The numbers don't lie. They're the most fiscally illiterate government in Australian history, potentially. They're sending us bloody broke. However, the Liberal Party can't necessarily get up on their own. There's a lot of people that don't like Peter Dutton, and I personally don't mind him, but I think we're getting a very watered down version of Peter Dutton at the moment.
100%.
We're not getting Peter Dutton, Immigration Minister of 5 years ago, that was firm in his convictions. You did, like Pauline, you didn't believe what he said. You didn't agree with everything he said at the time, but you knew where you stood with him. You knew how he felt on any given topic. And now all of a sudden, I think it's hard to watch that he seems to be capitulating a little bit and walking a lot of their more staunch policies, walking them back these last couple of weeks, which is a little bit frustrating. So for me personally, at One Nation, we can bring that party back to its conservative base. We have so many people, which surprised me, from Labor, traditional rust-on red voters that inherited their vote from their parents or grandparents or whatnot, and Liberal voters that are disenfranchised but are conservative, looking for a genuine third-party alternative. Now, the major parties are like a cult. It's like you will never get a Bomber supporter to vote to barrack for Collingwood. It's just not going to happen. But One Nation offers a viable third-party alternative, a very palatable third-party alternative to those conservative voters from those parties. Now, those parties have both moved arguably too far to the left, and I think people are starting to realise that, contrary to the propaganda the mainstream media has had the Australian public believe One Nation to be for the last 25 years, people are actually looking at our policies and going, well, hang on, I might have been fed a load of garbage here. One Nation could possibly be the last genuine bastion of conservatism in this country, and I truly believe we are, and that's where we offer a third-party alternative. Now, how this translates, we'd love to secure some lower house seats, absolutely. We really would, and we're getting to that point. When you consider Albanese secured government with, 33-odd%, if Dutton gets up, it's likely to be less than that, and it'll be a minority government, and it's terrifying, the prospect of Albo getting up again with a minority government from heaven forbid the Greens and the Teals and whatnot. So that's why we recommend firstly putting Labor, then the Greens, then the Teals very last. So at least if we end up with a Labor government, we end up with a Labor government, not a Labor Greens minority government. Just good to note. Now, so how this works for us, we'd love to pick up some lower house seats, and with those low percentages, I think maybe not this election cycle, but definitely by the next one or the one after that, the two-party preferred system is on the way out, and we will start to see lower house seats fall with probably between 18 and 25% of the vote. It's going to start happening, and parties like us and the Libertarians are already very close to achieving those sorts of numbers. But we need community support. We need political literacy, political education for people to actually go, well, bugger me, minor parties can secure lower house seats. Right, now, as far as upper house seats, Senate seats are concerned, We already hold 2 federal Senate seats with Senators Malcolm Roberts and Senator Pauline Hanson. We are a very good shot in Victoria, and we're a very good shot in South Australia, and we look quite good in Western Australia, and there's some opportunity again in New South Wales for other freedom-friendly minor parties like us and the Libertarians. So there is opportunity there, absolutely. Now, how that works is if we're able to secure the balance of power on the crossbench in the Senate, we can force the Liberals back to their Conservative base that they've gone away from. So anytime they want to get legislation across the line, it needs to go through the Senate, the House of Review. And if we have the balance of power with 4 or 5 senators on the crossbench, we can quite literally step in front and go, well, that's garbage. Explain to me how you determine that to be in the best interest of the Australian people, and we'll justify why we think it's not. And we'll work with them. We're not just going to be ridiculous, but we can block bad legislation in the Senate. And as such, they will be forced to come back to the Conservative silent majority of this country.
I like it. And the Liberals, I watched their ad this morning, and they're saying, it looks like it could be a minority government between Labor and the Greens.
That's their best argument. It's ridiculous. Don't vote for us because we've got fantastic policy, or we realise that we want to represent the Australian people. Just don't for them because they're terrible.
Yeah. And I remember when they used to say that about minor parties, it's like, all they do is complain, they don't have solutions. Now the Liberals, it's like all they do is complain, they don't have solutions.
Look, and that's another conversation I had at an event on the weekend. So the Liberals have recently stole a couple of our policies to campaign on, which is great. We actually don't mind because ultimately it's for the best interest of all Australians. So, yeah, fill your boots, steal them and run with them. It's for the best interest of all involved. However, it would have been nice, to allow us
recognise
to
you guys
first, but here we are, or acknowledge the fact that we raised them. But this is my discussion with people, especially on halving the fuel excise for 3 years. The Libs have walked it back a bit and gone, 1 year's enough. We're like, no. 3 years with the extent to make it permanent, the potential to make it permanent upon re-evaluation, and also the beer tax for licensed venues and on consumers. Our licensed venues are struggling at the moment. Nobody can afford to go out, so they're suffering the most. I know very well because my sister owns a pub in Northern Vic, out Manangatang Hotel. Get out there, drop in, have a beer up near the Murray, guys. Cheeky plug. I love to go out for a cheeky meal and a beer myself every Sunday afternoon. But it's at the point now, if you want a couple of schooners and a Palmer, it's cost you $100 to go down the pub for 2 hours. It's getting a bit much, and I think that's what's putting people off. So, look, it's great that the Libs are stealing these policies, but they need to steal some of our more clever economic management policies would be great, which they don't seem to be doing. They're not backing away from net zero. They're not backing out of any of these things that are ultimately, they're not backing down on mass migration and things like that, which are ultimately the causes and exacerbating factors for most of our problems we as a society face at the moment.
That's all Peter Dutton has to do.
I know.
I just want to grab him and shake him.
Yeah. Look, I think he knows it. I think he wants it. The trouble is he's got to get the rest of the party on side.
Left-leaning Liberals that are pushing him to be more left. Just be right. Just go to the right a little bit. Centre right, at least. Centre.
Anyway, I blew it on there and forgot the point of the key question there. So anyway, have a rant.
It's good. So you were talking about bringing the Liberals towards more conservative, and I guess with you guys also smaller government to a lesser extent than the Libertarians, but still a very significant and good extent.
As I said, mate, before, the Libertarians and us have a lot of crossover in this space. Government has come too encumbersome. And it's non-reflective when you look at, they say employment's high, there's no low employment. Yeah, but the public service sector has grown by 10%. Our public services are certainly not 10% better, and it's costing us a whole lot more than 10% more.
Yeah. And all the small businesses are going out of business and they're redundant because of this government.
So, especially in Vic, 123,000 businesses in Vic in 2023 alone. That's without the numbers from 24 and beyond now, and things have gotten significantly worse since then. Have either closed or moved interstate. It's just unbelievable. We're in the middle of a housing shortage, and there's been a 70% increase in construction companies filing for insolvency. Come on.
Yeah, and we need them.
100% we do.
They would be pretty busy if the councils might get out of the way and let us build a few more houses. And then there's all your other red tape, and that's a very deep conversation. Maybe we won't get into, but unless you want to.
Oh no, look, I concur entirely, mate. We know. But again, councils are rather fiscally illiterate these days as well. They don't know how to generate money. They don't seem to understand the free market economy or how it works. You need to support small industries and small businesses to thrive, and they will. That's how free markets work, You can't put regulation and red tape in place of everything and expect things to still plug along nicely. And councils, in all their inherent wisdom, seem to think if they give off this impression that there's land scarcity through not allowing subdivisions and whatnot and things like that in certain areas, then, it increases the value of the property through proposed scarcity. Now, that gives them the opportunity to raise rates because values go up, there's more demand, there's less supply, and that's how they generate profits through rate returns. So it's pretty frustrating to watch it all. But look, I think it's that flow-on effect of, a very, I call us the Socialist Republic of Victoria, but it's that socialist type politics that we've seen from the Labor government in Victoria for the last decade that's trickled down into councils as well. The entire attitude's changed, and there just seems to be no support for the gross domestic product winners of this country, which is small to medium business. So that includes businesses that employ up to 200 people. Now, 60% of Australians are employed by small to medium businesses, and they generate the majority of the backbone of this country's gross domestic product. And I think to lose sight of that fact as a government means you're too ideologically driven and you're not looking at the things that actually make a society work.
Very good. Well, I've got to say, you seem very informed and understand or have good advice on a lot of the issues, and this is what we need in our politicians. I think most of our politicians are getting very bad advice. But there's this...
You think that's because they're not from the real world, mate? This is what I'm saying.
Yeah. They're career politicians.
Yeah.
Yeah.
Look, and I've seen this firsthand. I was I was a brickie for many years, and then I joined the army as a combat engineer years ago. Did
real world experience.
Yeah, exactly. Did 10 years and then owned a business and whatnot as well. And then I joined One Nation and moved back to Victoria post-COVID. I was just going to run out here in the seat of Monash, so in Gippsland area. And I was shortlisted and put on a Senate ticket. And that was my first exposure in 2022 to politics. So jumped right in the deep end. And I've learned very quickly. So a lot of people think One Nation, because Pauline's been around for years, that One Nation's been in Victoria for a long time. We actually put together our first state team to run in the 2022 election in Vic State. And we got our member, Ricky Lee Tyrrell, just a dairy farmer's wife in Northern Victoria up. And I think that's a key point to note. We are looking for real people from the real world to represent this party in their communities, and we're finding them, and they're not hard to find. But managing those preferences, we're 100% success rate, one election in Victoria, and we've got to hand it up. So, with Ricky Lee doing the great work that she does in the Victorian Legislative Council, it gives us a platform to then develop the brand in Victoria. So we are truly at the grassroots level, and as such, I've been exposed as being Ricky Lee's advisor to a lot of let's call them the political elites of this state, the ones that have been around sucking at the teat off the government coffers for a very long time. Now, they claim to have a finger on the pulse of the working class community, but a lot of them, and it's not their fault entirely, but they were, a lot of them were raised on a silver spoon and went to the best private schools in Melbourne and whatnot. I went to Warragul Tech, and I think as a result, they got on debating teams and fell into safe Labor and Liberal seats, and that's effectively where they've been. So it's not entirely their fault that they don't have a broader education, but they really do not have a finger on the pulse of the collective needs of the working class community because they haven't done any of the things that you and I do on the daily. They haven't put kids through the public school system. They don't have parents going through public healthcare. Everything's private. They've never owned a small business. All these types of things and these challenges that we face on the daily, they've never really had to face. So I think that's where we see a disconnect with where they are and where we are, and we're seeing that people don't feel represented by the major parties. Like you and I all oppose, Greens ideology, and we know they're not about the bush at all. They're a human extinctionist movement. But the reality is, all sides, all spectrums of politics deserve to be represented. And when you see things like we did last year in federal parliament, say the under 16 social media bill or the misinformation, disinformation bill, the entire crossbench, left and right, were voting one way. Both major parties were voting the other. Now that sort of tells you everything you need to know where we are as a society. Those parties no longer represent the value sets of the working class. Now, yeah, we oppose the Greens and just about everything they bloody stand for. But the reality is, as Voltaire said, I may deplore what you say, but I'll defend to the death your right to say it. Now, that stands true here. They still deserve, the people that vote for that party, that actually understand what that party stands for and believe in that, they deserve to be represented in Parliament. The same way we bloody well do. Look, I can't say that they feel the same way about us. They'd love to see us gone. But, this is democracy. This is how we go. But this is how we operate. But, look, this is exactly what we're saying. An elite class of politicians, state and federal, that are no longer real people. They don't represent the real people in the real world. And I think they've lost touch with who we are and what we actually need. We're simple creatures. We really are. Just get out of our business, get out of our lives and get out of our way, and things will be just bloody fine.
Exactly.
Yeah. Absolutely. And when it's not, we'll learn from our own mistakes and we'll get better. It's not that hard.
Exactly.
We are growing adults for the most part.
Speak for yourself, mate. I don't know. Sometimes. I'm not. Childish antics from time to time, mate. I won't lie.
we are growing enough to know how to have fun and run our own lives.
Yeah.
I like what Gerard Rennick how he describes the career politicians, that they're weak and insipid. That's what they are. They are weak. They don't know how to stand up for anything because they've never had to in their lives. So yeah, I'm all about getting good people into Parliament and into the Senate, and when you've got people like Sarah Hanson-Young saying this is a bad bill about the mis and disinformation bill, and then the two parties are agreeing on it, that's when there's alarm bells going off. Like,
that is a massive red flag for society, isn't it?
But I think we said this last time. It's not, if she says it's a bad bill, it could very well be a really bad bill. But when she's on the same side as like Gerard Rennick and Malcolm Roberts and Pauline Hanson, then it's got to be really bad. Like,
it's really bad.
Like when those guys are teaming up together, there's something going on.
There's something really wrong.
These are people with very little in common with regard to value sets, all agreeing on something. We have a problem.
Now, on value sets, so from the left side of politics and quite frankly in the mainstream media, and I know you guys are sick of this question because it's really silly, but it keeps coming up in the comments on
our... I know where this is going.
Yeah. So apparently I'm told that Pauline Hanson's racist. Now I challenge them, like, show me what she said, and then they give me this court case, which I don't know, like, people can have a look for themselves. I don't think what she said was racist at all. I think if someone doesn't like the country, tell them to go back where they came from is perfectly acceptable. But I've just thought, did you want to explain to us what makes you such a racist?
Look, as I alluded to earlier, mate, so many people blown away when they go looking at our actual policies and they're like, it turns out you're not right-wing extreme Nazis. You're just regular people with some, centre or centre-right views. Anyway, look, it obviously stems back, and this has plagued us for years, obviously, from comments that were taken out of context that Pauline originally said in the late 90s. And arguably, they've come to fruition, and not too many people would debate against that. The fact being that, unchecked Chinese investment in the Gold Coast at the time was going to cause a problem. Now, you could argue that, it's added value to that community, but I personally wouldn't. I'd say she was bang on the money. Here we are 28 years later, and it has caused a problem. Look, and then fast forward to the situation you're talking about with Maureen Faruqi, I believe. For those that don't understand the context surrounding that, obviously Maureen Faruqi had said, after Queen Elizabeth had died, I understand, or to words of the effect of, I cannot mourn the the death of the monarch of a colonial such and such. Anyway,
Disgusting.
my problems with that, whether you're a monarchist or not, my problems with that are you are sworn under the Australian Constitution, which happens to be a Commonwealth of the British Empire, of the United Kingdom. You're happy to sit back and generate a profit from the Crown, effectively, out of the taxpayer coffers of this country. Yet you sit there, and this is the same with Lydia Thorpe, yet you sit there and claim that you think it's a fallacy to some extent, or you feel like you don't have to respect that system of governance that employs you and gives you, the great blessing of being able to represent the Australian people in federal parliament. Now, I find that disgusting. And, if anybody, let's put it in a different context. Pauline did say, piss off back to Pakistan. I personally don't have a problem with that. If you don't like
Me neither.
it.
I would have said worse.
Yeah, but firstly, so that should have been covered by parliamentary privilege. She should not have been able to take Senator Hanson to court for that. This is two elected members. We should be able to have tough discussions. If our politicians can't even have hard dialogue around these very emotionally charged issues, then when can we have these discussions as a society? We need to be able to have robust discussions about key issues as a society in order for us to find viable solutions and move forward. Now, would Senator Hanson have been labelled the same way had it been, say, a British expat that lived here and said something along those lines about, not British, that's a terrible example, say a US expat or somebody that came here, say a white European Christian American that came here and had problems with the whole situation, and Pauline told them to piss off back to their own country. Would you still be racist?
No.
Of course not.
We all know the answer. Yep.
So, it's frustrating to have to deal with these sorts of the topics and the knee-jerk reactions from government, state and federal to try and protect people's feelings. Like, this is what we're seeing with the anti-vilification laws in Victoria just last week or the week before. You're literally trying to protect people from getting hurt feelings now. Stop it. People reserve the right to be offended. It's your prerogative. Just be offended. I'm not going to not say what I want to say. As I said, we need to be able to have these hard conversations, and particularly the very vocal left jump up and down and get cry emotional abuse and scream, and then it squashes all dialogue on these tough social issues that we need to have, and everybody ends up walking on eggshells, and we never find resolve. Like, if you are unable to engage in these, yes, we need to advocate from a place of compassion, of course, but if you're unable to engage in robust dialogue around these emotionally charged topics without being emotionally triggered, you need to remove yourself from the room, because the adults need to have a conversation.
Boom.
Yeah.
That one.
Yeah.
So we are adults now.
Depends on the context, mate.
Yeah. No, 100%.
Very good. Like I've said in some of those arguments.
Sorry, before we do move on though, Tim, I will jump in and say, to those that do have reservations that One Nation is somehow a racist party. So I believe 60% of Victorians are now born elsewhere. And that's an incredible figure. And as such, our membership in Victoria is our fastest growing membership in the country, which is no surprise, being that, Victoria's turned towards socialism and the silent majority are looking for new political representation. Now, having said that, completely by accident, 55 to maybe 60% of my endorsed candidates for this federal election in Victoria are born elsewhere. It tells you a lot about, the cross-section of this community that have reached out and want to actively represent the One Nation value set in federal parliament. They've come to this country, they see the value in this country more so than a lot of the people that are born here, and they've put their hand up to run as candidates for the One Nation party. And most of them do this in the face of adversity and challenging circumstances amongst their own communities, because they face the same biases that I do for being racist. Now, we've got an Iraqi, a Christian Iraqi, we've got Argentinians, we've got 2 Italians, I've got 2 South Africans, I've got 2 Indians, we've got people from all over the world, and that's not deliberate. We're not trying to deliberately be diverse. That is legitimately just the best people that put their hand up for specific seats that we wanted to endorse to represent the value set of this party and the people of Victoria at this federal election. So, yeah, take your
and do you really think
racism comments and go and have a look at the Greens if you reckon they are,
exactly. But the thing is, do you think that if Pauline Hanson's One Nation was a racist party, do you think these people would want to be running for it? Like,
yeah, exactly.
People just annoy the crap out of me.
I think my take on that would be people come from these other countries where they do have socialist states, communist states, authoritarian, maybe is a better word, and
can see what's happening.
Yeah, they look at the other parties, mainly the major parties. They look at what's happening in Australia and they go, wow, I've just come here to get away from that rubbish. I need to support, One Nation or one of these other parties that are pushing against this stuff. So I think that's what's happening. And I think once they look at what Pauline Hanson's about and the party, One Nation, they very quickly realise there's no racism there at all. There is looking after Australia. It's putting Australia first.
Putting Australia first.
The country, and they want us to put ourselves first.
And they value Australian culture. They love Australian culture. They came here for Australian culture. And we're telling people that come here that they do. Some of those are just economic immigrants too that travel across 6 other continents to get to Australia. And they claim they're, coming here, they've fled their own country pending persecution. But yeah, they've managed to pass 6 other continents to get here for a start. But they value Australian culture so much, a lot of these people that have come here, that they see that we are too accommodating. We're allowing people to come here and we're not asking them to assimilate to Australian culture at all. We want people to be able to celebrate their own culture, absolutely. And multi-ethnicity is fine, but multicultural as a society doesn't work, because this culture and the Judeo-Christian value set that founded modern Australia is the one that has served us so well for the last couple of 100 years and is the one that has made us a wonderful country to be in that people actually want to come to. So we need to protect that. We've got an inherent responsibility to protect that, because every generation that comes after is depending on us to provide them with the same quality of life that we've been lucky enough to enjoy.
Yeah, and isn't that sad as looking from the outside in at Australians, that they're the ones that are seeing that we're allowing this to happen. We're not standing up for our values, and we're not pushing back hard enough against all of the crap that they're bringing into this country and destroying it.
I think it's more psychological than that for me though, Carly, with Australia, especially when you consider a lot of people think we don't have culture or whatnot. Anyone that says that, I think, is an idiot for a start. But I think the point is, we are a young nation and we're suffering something. So 100 years ago, the formulation of the Anzacs and us in New Zealand actually stepping up to fight on the global stage to represent the value sets of Western democracy. We were a nation in its absolute infancy. And I think even now we are only in our adolescence and we're suffering, in our identity crisis as a nation. And it's the same identity crisis that all teenagers and adolescents do face through the vulnerabilities that you face through those years. It is challenging, but I think as a nation, going through that, it's more important now than ever to hang on to our Judeo-Christian value set and say, look at us, we are Australian, we can be proud of this. We don't need external validation from the global community to tell us it's okay to be who you want to be. It's in our nature and it's part of our culture to be blatantly insubordinate, We're born of prisoners, for God's sake.
We're Aussies.
That's in the Anzac tradition. A lot of the Anzacs were first known because they wouldn't follow the orders of their British commanders. Like we are, even the black fellas here, they push back on the British colonialists. So, it is in our inherent nature from all sides of Australians to be inherently insubordinate. We can't help it. So why are we looking to the rest of the world for external validation? And we're fine just the way we are. Let's keep being who we are and be proud of it.
Amen.
Exactly.
Yeah.
All right. Now, I don't know. How are we doing for time, Carly?
45.
Okay. Yeah, we've got good time then. Did you want to talk about, I don't know, like some of your outdoor policies or related stuff, whether you got things on firearms and fishing, I don't know, the youth excise tax and all that sort of stuff?
Yeah, look, so I don't actually have any dot points in front of me, but so a couple of the big ones that we're really campaigning off this time around is cost of living. I mean, we hoped after COVID that people were going to wake up to the erosion of sovereignty and individual liberties, and such as the libertarians, as you well know, Tim. Which we really thought that people were going to wake up and vote based off that, but sadly that didn't eventuate. So we're facing another 3 years of tough economic times, and I think now it's inevitably hit people's hip pockets, and now people really are waking up, and they're looking to vote a different way, but they're voting with their hip pocket, as they bloody well should. So good economic policy is what's going to save us. Now, you can't keep everyone happy with the pork barrelling bullshit that both the majors are trying to sell at the moment. They're throwing money around everywhere, and I see that the Libs have just started doing it too.
Our money.
Why vote for the parties that are bereft of good ideas? Vote for the minor parties that are actually coming up with the good ideas, the good, fresh ideas that are being stolen. So as far as campaigning this time, we know we can likely secure seats off good economic policy. That does have the potential to steer this country off the precipice of economic collapse. Because let's be honest, we are. If we cut migration back to the 1.8 million elbows let in the last 3 years, we would be in a per capita, in an actual recession, not just a per capita recession. So having said that, a couple of key policies, a good one first is to start with that immigration policy. We're not saying zero people. We've currently got, I think, about 220,000 people a year leaving on average in the last couple of years. So we want to reduce that back to, I think we had a figure of about 135 or could have been 85. Anyway, it's back to below the figure that's leaving, because that will effectively achieve net zero migration. It'll alleviate the burden on the housing sector and obviously our services as well. So we want to walk that back from 1.8 million in 3 years to 130,000 each year. At the moment, there's 75,000 people here that are currently overstayed their visas. They're here illegally. And we want to see those people sent back. Make an example. Our kindness will not be taken advantage of. You've got correct channels that you can be going through and you should be going through. And that's the reality. But also to ensure in future, we allow people into this country that come from culturally cohesive nations. Every other Western country on the planet has some stipulations around who they allow people, where they allow people from. And look, at the moment, we can't support any more people on the welfare industry. And if people coming into this country speak zero English and have, very little skill sets, well, then they're instantly a drain on our economy. I'm not saying that they don't want to contribute, and I'm not saying they won't be able to contribute to our GDP in 5 to 7 years, but in the short term, we'd need to prop them up while they, learn the language or gain some skill sets that they can utilise in Australia. So that's our position on immigration, and we intend to keep it that way until such time as we can house every Australian and every Australian can be, able to feed themselves again. So we just need to put a break on things there, get our feet back under ourselves and, pick our society up. Then we can go back and look at our immigration policy. So that's the first. A second one is tax cuts for regular Australians, like as I alluded to before. So we've got the alcohol excise tax cut for venues and individuals. We've also got another brilliant one that I believe it's already implemented in the UK or something similar in the UK. So couple splitting tax. So if you're a couple with at least one child, you pay tax as a single, so not as two individuals. That has the potential to save people an absolute fortune, especially young couples that have had, one child or two children that are trying to get into their first house. We also want to halve the GST on building products, because we've seen an increase of about 30 or 40% on building products in the last couple of years as a result of numerous things, flow-on implications from getting rid of timber industries and all these other things and COVID and whatever else. Again, and the fuel excise tax half for 3 years. So energy is a big one for us, and it always has been. We truly believe that our energy mix, a little bit of solar, whatever, but we've got, just here at Loy Yang itself, we've got 500 years supply at current demand in the Latrobe Valley. Now that provides over 30% of Victoria's power at the moment. So that's an important key to note. it's a finite resource, and again, we can sit on our moral high horse and spit vitriol about, look at us, we're not burning any coal, but the reality is that we're still going to, it's blatant hypocrisy because we're still going to be selling it on an export market. It's owned by
China will just burn it.
It'll still be getting dug up and sold. Look, look, this is the uranium discussion all over. We sit on our moral high horse, spit vitriol. Look at us, we're a no nuclear country, yet we're the biggest exporter of thorium and uranium on the planet. Like, come on, just stop it. The hypocrisy's got to go. And having said that, so that's another avenue for cheaper power as well. Let's give that industry some security first. There's a lot on the left saying, well, look at it's failing. It's, the infrastructure's falling apart. That's because you haven't given the coal industry any security for 30 years. You told them it's ending, it's ending, it's ending. So in a free market economy, which again, they don't understand, no money's been tipped into the maintenance, the preventative maintenance or the ongoing upgrades of these facilities. Now, if you told them, all right, you know what, we're going to kick back into coal for a while, we're not going to put any, cap on the end of your lifespan, well, they would tip more money into their infrastructure. It would be reliable again. The coal industry in this country is the envy of the rest of the world, and it always has been. So firstly, that's the way you make energy cheap again. Same with gas. We've got abundance reserves both in the Gippsland Basin and the Otway Basins, but we're 5 years behind on exploration, so we need to go back to that exploration state. We're happy to explore nuclear as a future program, but we're not going to just drop all our eggs in that basket straight up. We think it's an expensive transition that needs to happen over a course of time. And unlike the Liberal government and their backwards walking, we firmly oppose the Paris Agreement. So net zero can get stuffed, and so can the Paris Agreement. That's, the World Economic Forum and all these things. They're not looking out for the economics of the Western world.
No.
They want to decimate us. Look, and I think that brings me to my last point, that One Nation has always been a staunch advocate for and will continue to be a staunch advocate against the crippling tenets of globalism, the WEF, the UN, the WHO. There is of no benefit to Australia to remain a part of those organisations. Unelected foreign bureaucrats that wish to dictate to us our social and economic policy. They're going to kill us.
So that would answer what my next question was going to be, which was your position on the UN's 30 by 30 agenda. Your position is that can get stuffed, I assume?
Oh, 100%, mate, 100%. Look, we are the custodians of this land, all of us in this country, and it's up to us to manage it accordingly and locking people out of it with regard to the 30%. By 2030 for under the pretense of carbon sequestration is absolute garbage. And a lot of people don't understand what that actually encapsulates, like the context of how much land is actually required to achieve the remaining 8% of that. It's effectively a piece of land the size of Victoria across the country. And they don't want the desert land. They don't want the Simpson Desert, mate.
No. They want prime agricultural land.
They want the Central Highlands bushland. They want Fraser Island. They want, natural assets that we all love and enjoy.
Mm-hmm.
Mate, clearly I can keep gassing if you want, guys. I can't help myself.
No, we love it.
What else? I mean, I suppose if we're letting people get to know you, you touched on your past, so in the military.
Yeah.
So what was your role there?
So as a combat engineer, I had, firstly, my service was an actual honour and a privilege, to be honest. A lot of people say, oh, thanks for your service, mate. I'm like, no, it was actually an honour and a joy, and I thoroughly enjoyed my service, and I'd recommend it to anyone. Now, as a combat engineer, so because we are such a small defence force, we have a lot of scope of ability or requirement for capability within any respective role. So as a combat engineer, it's effectively to build things and blow things up. It's called mobility and counter mobility. So to enable our own forces to mobilise and to provide counter mobility obstacles and whatnot for enemy environments or enemy forces as well. Now, we operate in numerous different environments, and this encapsulates, so not only explosive demolitions and whatnot, and IED search and disarmament, but also building bridges, blowing bridges up. We're the guys that build stuff and blow stuff up as combat engineers. And as I said, I really love my job, and I was very good at it. I
would love that too.
Yeah, so it was a lot of fun, but also humanitarian aid, disaster relief operations. So I did deploy on ops doing both in combat roles, in combat zones in Iraq and whatnot, and also on humanitarian aid, disaster relief operations, hit domestically and overseas. Now that's quite a broad capability again, because you're doing anything from building bridges again to felling trees and cleaning up flooded areas. I mean, geez, even I was posted to the 3rd Brigade in Townsville, and we had the floods in 2019, and we were extracting people from their roofs and on our military Zodiacs and things like that. So yeah, look, I thoroughly enjoyed the role. It was very rewarding, but yeah, individual experiences do vary in the military, and I think we're all well aware of that. But yeah, I happen to thoroughly enjoy my service. Yeah, but I did that, so 7 years full time. I joined a bit later in life. I was 29 when I joined, and I did 7 years full time. And by then I was a Army NCO, a corporal, and I transferred to reserve service so that I could focus on other things. But I did another 3 years as an active reservist, so about 10 years all up, and just under. Yeah, thoroughly enjoyed it, mate. Recommend it to anyone.
It sounds like you thoroughly love the country and you want to be capable of defending it, whether that's politics or physically with a gun.
Look, I think it just comes back to being someone of service, and I'm not academically educated. I was a brickie for 10 years prior to that. I'm still back on the tools now, to be honest, but I think it's just one of those things. I probably underrated myself, like most of us do, when I was a bit younger, and I didn't know what I was capable of. So I just I wanted to provide service to community, and I didn't really know how to go about doing that. I was a young father. My daughter was born when I was 21, and she's now 21, and I'm 42. So that happened quickly for a start. But
wow.
Yeah. But it's one of those things. I wanted to provide a service to my community, and I didn't really know how to do that. So I joined the military. It's something I always had an interest in, growing up in the bush. But yeah, I'd never got around to it being a young father. So I finally got around to it in the late 20s, early 30s, whatever. Did the 10 years, and then I realised, we have an inherent responsibility to continue to be people of service. I think those of us that value this country and what it represents, and especially as my daughter was getting to an age where now she's 21, and she has nowhere near the same opportunities that we had at 21. So we've dropped the ball, and it's our responsibility to pick the ball back up and run with it. And that's why I thought, well, politics is the next way to provide service to community. I figured I'd just put my hand up and see what happened. I had no intention to ever be a politician. I still don't, to be honest. I don't love the idea, but the reality is the more politicians I meet, the more I realise there's a real requirement for real people from the real world just to get involved in whatever capacity. And I've always said that to Senator Hanson and our leadership team that, look, if someone better comes along as, state president in Victoria, I'll get behind them. We'll put them up, and I'll get behind them 100%. Effectively, I'll throw my hand up right now because no one else is. So that's how that came about, mate. And I think I've got another interesting theory too that you guys may or may not agree with. And I think I call it Zennials, so not quite millennials and not quite Gen Xers, where that crossover generation between about 1977 and about 1984, 85, we don't quite fit the mold for either Gen X or millennial. We're a micro gen, and we're the last generation to grow up with an analog childhood and the first to grow up with a digital adulthood. So when it comes to context for how things used to be, I'm not saying change is perpetual, it's always going to occur. But the thing is, I think we've got an inherent responsibility because we will be the last generation that remember what the analog life was like and the values that were different and how things were different. So I think as a result, as a generation, we've got an inherent responsibility to get involved now because we've still got that context point, that point of reference to how things were before everything went digital and went crazy, to be honest.
Yeah, and I actually, I 100% agree with that. My partner, he's 85. And the different, and I'm 90. Yeah. So there's the 5-year difference, but there's so much happened between 85 and 90 that he sees things so differently to how I do, and things that I wouldn't normally pick up on about, how everything breaks now, like just little things like that. Everything we get in from China, everything breaks. Nothing's made to last these days. And he gets so frustrated about that type of stuff. And I was basically, 90s was and early 2000s was when that kind of it kind of just became the new normal. And that was just how we started living. So I don't pick up on that so much. But he's like, back in my day, and everything. I'm like, you were born in '85.
Yeah, no, and I agree with that. And I don't mean it to say that, we are going to be the best suited to steer the direction of this country forever. Like, this is entirely the problem. We know the gross domestic product winners, or the backbone of this country's GDP, are that age demographic between about 25 and about 55, who are still in their peak working life cycle. Those are the people with a finger on the pulse. Now, the micro gen that I'm talking about, the Zennials, we're at, effectively, I was born in '82, so I'm kind of right in the middle of it. So the youngest of which are at about sort of 38 now. And I think we have to remember that, because I think people have had a gutful of these dinosaurs, these 70-year-old elites in the major political parties that are still pulling the strings, whether they're elected members or not, being the deciding force on the direction we travel as a country. I mean, you look at how much influence people like John Howard and whatnot still have over the Liberal Party. And I think as a result, we need to identify when we are no longer that finger on the pulse demographic of the community, and I think we need to then handball to the next generation. And we do. We have an opportunity here, and as I said, I think that demographic cutoff is at about 55, and you're no longer. I'm not saying you can't add value, but what I'm saying is that I think people need to get involved in politics a lot younger. Carry the baton for a few years, and once you get to sort of that 55 and above, it's probably then time to start thinking about training the next generation, which we've made a conscious effort to do at One Nation. Start training the next generation of Conservatives, because we can't have people waiting until they're 60 to get into politics anymore. I mean, it still happens, of course, and when you have wonderful people within that community getting involved, but we need people to get involved much younger, carry the baton for 7 to 10 years or whatnot, and then train up the next generation and hand it over before you fall outside of that demographic. That's just my personal theory.
And a lot of that's got to do with ego as well. People need to learn to put their egos aside and start to let the next generation step up.
Yeah, and not make a bloody career out of it. This is never meant to be a career.
Yeah.
It's meant to be service.
Yeah.
Very good. Well, that must be about it for time, and I know you're very busy.
Yes.
So unless there's something you really wanted to cover very quickly before we go, we might let you run along.
Yeah, no, thanks guys, appreciate it, and again, thanks for the opportunity to speak. It's obviously a cause that's very close to my heart, and I'll no doubt see you guys out the bush somewhere. And outside of that, just to your viewers, give minor parties a go. If you're a rust on red or a blue, no matter who, that's fine. You can give them your three. It'll still get to them. Give us, and say the Libertarians or like-minded, freedom-friendly minor parties, give us your 1 and 2 and then send your 3 to them. Don't worry, we're preferencing them above Labor as well. Don't worry,
that's
how preference flow works. It'll still get to them. They understand this. You need to understand this. Just give us a chance to bring them back to their Conservative base.
And giving your number one vote to a good minor party that you might think they're not going to get in, but they're still, they represent your values better. It actually helps fund them as well, and that's very important. The minor parties, they've got thousands against millions.
Yeah, you're absolutely right. All our candidates are self-funded. Every single one of them has got skin in the game. They haven't just thrown their hand up when we've thrown money at them. They've literally got their own money on the line. They are putting their money where their mouth is. And that's an important point to note. So thanks for raising that, Tim. But also, a vote for the major parties is simply an invitation to be delivered more of the same. So if you're happy with the way things are going and the trajectory we're currently on, sure, give the majors your 1 and your 2. But if you're not, it's you're teaching them a lesson. You're showing them with your feet that I will not accept more of the same. I am going to give my number 1 to somebody else. You can have my 2, my 3, my 4, my 5, my whatever. That's how we teach them.
Well, I've done how to vote cards for every electorate in Victoria, and that we've done the preferencing so that it's perfect. So if there's anyone is confused about it at this stage, jump on, have a look at my how to vote cards, and it'll show you how preferencing goes.
You're an absolute gem, mate. You truly are. You're an asset to this cause, the biggest asset.
She is
Thank
good.
you.
But yeah, guys, those how to vote cards, they are just suggestions. If there's something you don't like on it, do it different. This is why we're doing voter education as well. Don't go ripping into Carly. She's just put what she thinks is best, right?
Might as well. Everyone else does.
Thanks, Warren.
Love it, guys.
Thank you
very
so much, Warren.
Have a wonderful day.
Thank you.